Hi there. It's incredibly, we're on episode 22 of this now. Episode 22 of Idiot Wind, as we blow and bluster our way through the definitive vinyl collection of the awesome Bob Dylan, one of Sid Smith's favourite artists. And my name's Sean Hewitt. I'm in Nottingham, and he's, as you can see, Sid's encased in a special landing pod somewhere above the surface of the moon of Jupiter, Titan. But this week we're going to be talking about this unusual album, Shot of Love. And I know Sid will have a few things to say as an art lover about this astonishing cover, which is the cover of Shot of Love, a real masterpiece and widely remarked at the time as one of the greatest album covers of all time. This is an unusual album. It's officially the third, or unofficially the third, in Bob's gospel trilogy. And the idiotic view of this is, after this, he forgot all about the religion and just carried on with his usual shtick. That's bollocks. Religion is a very important factor of all Bob Dylan records from now on. It's just nowhere near as idiotic and full on as it is on the worst of these three albums. And you can see that process beginning to manifest itself on this record. This is a transitional record. This is a song that includes a lot of religious material, but also includes a lot of stuff that isn't religious at all and cannot be interpreted in religious in any way. It's wholeheartedly secular. So this was a troubled album. It took a long time to make, and there were a load of sessions. Most of the sessions were allegedly produced by Chuck Plotkin, who'd been working with Bruce Springsteen at this period, but it's basically produced by Bob. The opening track, the quite impressive Shot of Love, the title track, is produced by Bumps Blackwell, a big R&B producer, of whom Bob was a big fan, and really it would have been great to see him do the whole album, because that track has a real punch to it. It really does kick the album off with a real joie de vivre we don't often get on this period of Bob's life. But this album comes with this rather wonderful inner sleeve in which Bob has written out allegedly who's on each track. And this is another problem with this record. It's not the fully rehearsed band of the previous record. This is all over the shop in terms of contributors. So we still have Jim Keltner on drums, we still have Tim Drummond on bass, but we also have, it must be said, loads of other people. Like on the song Heart of Mine, which is a fairly decent song and was released as a single, we get Ringo Starr and Ron Wood for no apparent reason. And in fact, there are loads of better takes of that song, but Bob's obviously put that one on because Ringo and Ron are on it and they're his mates. So wouldn't it be great if they were on my record? And so, yeah, I'll put the worst version of the song on to get them on. And I'm being quite serious. That seems to be exactly what's happened. Another unusual aspect of this album is, if you look at this rather magnificent list of songs, which is the running order and instrumental lineup for every song on the original album, you'll notice something quite odd. I'm not expecting you to spot it, Sid, because you can barely read this. One of the songs on the album isn't on that list. And this is a start of a new period in Bob, where he picks the wrong song for the record. And it becomes quite marked in the next album we'll do. But basically, there's a track on this, and it starts on the vinyl, it starts side 2. And that's a song called The Groom Still Waiting at the Altar, which is quite an impressive rocker. That's not on this list because originally Bob didn't put it on the album. It was a B-side of the single. And everyone said, that's a good track. Why haven't you put that on the record? And it was added to the record for the CD release in the late 1980s. But that's an astonishingly stupid thing to do. I mean, it's a really good track. I mean, why would you leave that off? And you've got the song Trouble on there, which is rubbish. And this becomes a problem. The groom's still waiting at the altar isn't the top end of Bob's writing by any means. It's not a classic, but it's a very decent song, and it's very well written with a very interesting lyric. That's another thing about this record. The lyrics are starting to be a bit more interesting. But this does have consequences later on. On the next record, Infidels, that's called, there were several brilliant songs recorded in those sessions, and he seems to have left most of them off the record. And this seems to upset people at the time who were in the studio. And it certainly upset the album's putative producer, Mark Knopfler. And it caused outrage when, inevitably, as it always does with Bob Dylan, bootlegs of the songs began to seep onto the market. This is an early harbinger of that tendency. Bob often produces songs which are later regarded as masterpieces, and he leaves them off. And the next song I'm going to mention is a song called Angelina, which was written for this album and recorded during it. It's by far the best song recorded for this album. That's not on it either. It was never on it. And there's a version of that on the bootleg series, volumes 1 to 3, a triple CD released in the early 90s. And there's a version of it on last year's box set about this period, Springtime in New York. And the omission of that song, which is in the top end of Bob's writing, is utterly inexplicable. And it's still not the worst of those cases we'll come across. So I'm not commenting on it because I don't understand it. And I don't understand why someone who can write such good songs then doesn't bother to release them. But it is an unusual aspect of this most mysterious and eccentric artist. Now, for this record itself, which we've not got around to talking to, I think this is pretty good, actually. I don't think it's top-notch. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's a classic Bob Dylan album. But Shot of Love is one of the best opening tracks on a Bob album, I think. It's nothing profound about it. It's just a great piece of exciting music. Heart of Mine's a nice song. Property of Jesus is like a song from Slow Train Coming. The Property of Jesus. I mean, it doesn't sound very enlightened to me. Lenny Bruce is a song completely secular, unless you think he's trying to make out Lenny Bruce is Jesus, which some people do. One thing I will say about this is he used to know Lenny Bruce, Bob, and quite liked him. And he's written this song saying what a great guy he was. And that's all very nice, and it's nice to see some other subject matter cropping up in this period. I just think Lenny Bruce is a bloody awful song. I think it's really maudlin and really, really awful. Watered Down Love's a good song. Dead Man is a good song. That's another religious song. In the Summertime is another religious song, but In the Summertime is the most underrated song on this record, I think. I think In the Summertime is a lovely song, both musically and lyrically. That is a religious song. And a year or two ago, Chrissie Hynde released a version of In the Summertime, and it's absolutely beautiful. And she sings it really well. Trouble is probably my least favourite track other than Lenny Bruce on this record. I think it's utterly unsubstantial. But the album ends with a song called Every Grain of Sand. And I think this is a very noteworthy song. One, it's a brilliant song. I think it's a beautiful song. Bob is referring very heavily to the works of William Blake, one of his favourite poets, in the words. And it's a beautiful expression of a religious faith in a way that doesn't hector or badger the listener that they're bad in any way. It doesn't even go within a million miles of that. Instead, towards the end of the song, if it has a target, it's Bob himself. It's his own religious doubts are dealt with for the first time. In the first time in these three albums, with the possible of one bit of levity on the end of Shot of Love, when he's telling the audience, "Are you ready? Are you ready for him coming?" And then he suddenly sings quite sort of spontaneously, "Hope I'm ready." and it always makes me laugh because he suddenly seems to think, hang on, what if I'm not ready? I hope I'm ready. And that's the only other expression of doubt on these three albums, apart from Every Grain of Sand, where he talks about the master and the bloke who's created the world, and he says he just sings this line: "Sometimes I think there's someone there, other times it's only me." And that is really a humanizing moment on this trilogy. Suddenly he's admitting, what if it's not true? You know, and I find that very moving inclusion in the song. The song has been beautifully covered by many artists over the years, and behind Sid you see the brilliant Emmylou Harris album Wrecking Ball, produced by Daniel Lanois, who will eventually reach in this series. And she sings a lovely version of the song on that record. It's a beautiful song, and one that Bob is using to end his shows in 2021, 2022. So it's one of the two gospel era songs he's singing. I think Shot of Love is more interesting than brilliant, but at its best it is brilliant. And I think it's an interesting signpost to what's next. There were lots of songs left off this record. I mean, we mentioned this last episode, which is the 2017 box, which deals very deeply. Trouble No More deals with this gospel period, and it includes live performances of all this music from the era, apart from Shot of Love, of course. But the final two CDs are a performance in London at Earl's Court in 1981, the year Shot of Love came out, and showing this gradual secularization of this thing. They show him playing old songs in his set list. So you get like a Rolling Stone and It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, suddenly appearing among Man Gave Name to All the Animals and those kind of songs, which is a very weird and quite stirring concert by, again, a very good band. Last year, this box set was released, Springtime in New York. The most interesting thing about this album is its insight into the sessions for Infidels, the next album, which we'll be dealing with in our next episode. But one interesting thing is disc one is a series of rehearsals from the Shot of Love period, and disc two is basically overwhelmingly outtakes from Shot of Love, and they feature several cover versions, as always, from Bob, but loads of originals that didn't make this record, one of which is the only known take of a song he's obviously making up on the spot, and is quite good. So I think this shows his musicians are inspiring him, and he is getting into the spontaneous enjoyment of making music in a way he hasn't done since the period before Slow Train Coming. I think it's a transitional album, and I think what's next will be just as interesting and just as disheartening, if you like, as many of the things we've heard so far. What did you think of it, Sid?
The whole kind of gospel period, which I knew about, you know, through reputation, when I eventually started to get to these albums through this series, so I was kind of quite prepared, particularly with the first one, to kind of to hate it, you know, and I'd been sort of in a way prepped by that because I was aware of all the controversy. What I found with the last album and with this album is actually I didn't mind them at all. I thought Shot of Love. I've listened to it twice, okay, and I enjoyed it both times. One of the main reasons I enjoyed it was I love the sound of the album. It's got a great sound. It's very live. You can hear the room in which it's been recorded, or at least, you know, it has that sort of eavesdropped presence to it, which some albums do have, and I like that. I like the fact that we are kind of being kind of allowed into a space where the band is working. It doesn't sound smoothed over and, you know, produced. I think when you listen to some of the way 1980s albums were recorded and produced, They can often sound very, very dated.
Watch this space.
Whereas Shot of Love in every now and again, it sort of sounds like, you know, it sort of stretches backwards and into the past. There's a track. Oh God, I'm terrible with the names of it. You've already mentioned it. The Groom's Still Waiting at
the Altar.
Yeah. That to my ears, it sounds like it. Not so much the sound of it, but just the kind of the ambience of it, the sort of the contents of it. Sounds to me like it could have been picked up off Highway 61 or Blonde on Blonde or something. It sort of fits right in with that sort of style, it seems to me. Tracks that I was surprised that I liked. I thought Property of Jesus was great.
Did you?
I really enjoyed it. As we've said on other occasions, I don't mind, you know, people who believe in God and sing songs about it. Lots of artists do it, and there's a good, strong tradition of people singing gospel songs, and you don't have to be a believer to get that sort of sense of relief and that sense of, you know, abandonment into the music and into the kind of rapture, which is, I know, is a loaded word now, of course, but through the evangelist movement. But so an album that does all that, I generally don't have any problems. And as you say, he seems to have moved away a bit from the kind of the hardcore Bible thumping, hectoring nastiness of Slow Train Coming. There are moments in it which are frankly risible. I think you've already mentioned one of them, Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce is a terrible song.
We're talking about, you know, the 20th century's greatest lyricist, who did come up with the line. I had to write it down because I knew I wouldn't remember it. Lenny Bruce didn't rob any churches or cut off any babies' heads. Now, I'm perfectly prepared to accept, actually, a lot of what Bob Dylan does is tongue-in-cheek. And I think think more than people realise, even the very convinced Bobaholics like yourself. I think a lot of writes is tosh, and he knows it's tosh. But he also knows that there'll be for every bit of tosh there'll be a small industry of great and good writers churning out tomes about the inherent meaning of it all, and that's fine. But Lenny Bruce just frankly daft.
I think that's a risible lyric with many embarrassing lines, and that line you've just quoted always reminds me of Paul Whitehouse and Bob Mortimer in their fishing program when they meet the vicar to talk about religion in a church, and she's talking to them, and Bob asked Paul, "Did you think you've led a good life? Do you think you're a good person, Paul?" And he says, "Well, I've not committed any genocides, have I?" And Bob just goes, "Well done, Paul. Well done." And he didn't. He didn't cut off any babies' heads. Well, that's damning with faint praise there, Bob. Let's be honest, isn't it?
I think I think the general sort of vibe of this album is it's the kind of Bob Dylan album you can eat between meals, you know, without ruining your appetite. It you know, it comes along. It's not going to stodge you out.
My least favourite kind of Bob Dylan album.
There's not too much to think about, and what there is, you know, is fine. And as I say, the thing that I enjoy the most about it is the sound of it. The final point that I would make is, as ever with Bob Dylan, this is the thing that I've never really been able to understand why. given that I'm not a great fan of Bob Dylan, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. When I heard Emmylou Harris singing "Every Grain of Sand," I didn't know the song. You know, so I didn't know it was a Bob Dylan song even. And I mean, I love Emmylou Harris, who often sings about God. And I loved that album, Wrecking Ball, and that song, "Every Grain of Sand." Oh, it's wonderful stuff. I mean, it really is. And Dylan's capacity to write material, which other people then take and transform into something amazing, it's just astonishing how, you know, he was doing that a lot. A lot of people were taking his stuff in the 60s, as we previously discussed, and it continues with a track like "Every Grain of Sand" and Emmylou Harris's stunning version of it. So, you know, Dylan, as skeptical as I am about Dylan, I cannot deny that he has this ability to write songs that, even if his performances don't do anything for me, other artists imbue it and can add their own colour and take to it. That's quite a skill. You know, I mean, I am prepared to accept he does know how to write a good song, even if he sometimes comes up with songs like Lenny Bruce. He nevertheless does know how to write a good song, and I'm more than happy to acknowledge that. So, would I buy this album? Yeah, I might do if I came across it in a record shop and it was a couple of quid. Yeah, I might buy it. But you know,
don't go overboard.
But yeah, it's all right.
Says man who hated Blood on the Tracks. Well, thank you, Sid, for your input there. What's your favourite song on this record?
Ooh,
we didn't do that last time.
Well,
although I think we both said it was Solid Rock. So
I think Solid Rock. We both agree that Solid Rock was a great song.
On the last album, that was.
Yeah. On the last album. On this one, do you know? I'm going to pick "Every Grain of Sand."
Yeah.
For all the reasons I've mentioned. But if I didn't pick "Every Grain of Sand," you know, I might pick "Property of Jesus," actually.
Really? That really surprises me. It really does. The other one that always surprised me, Sid.
The other one that I might go to, although it's a bit more obvious, is "Shot of Love," the actual title track.
Yeah. I think I'd pick "Every Grain of Sand" because I think it's something about it. It's just something. Yeah. It's like one of those songs like "Forever Young," which seems very simple but it's got hidden depths to it. And you know, you're right. Emmylou Harris does a brilliant job with it, but I like Bob's version as well. Yeah. And my second choice will be "The Groom Still Waiting at the Altar," which I find it astonishing. Yeah, he thought he'd leave off the album, and I mean, I just don't understand his decision to. From this point on, he starts to make increasingly eccentric decisions about the pools of songs he's recorded. He really does. And we've all been frustrated, haven't we, with artists who, you know, you've heard the song live, you know they've written that song, it'll be on the next album, and it isn't there. You probably got a few artists who've done that a couple of times, maybe once. Bob starts to do it nearly every time from now on. Yeah. You know, oh, it'll be great, that album, she's written that. Oh, it's not on.
Yeah.
And there's a great story about that on the next record, which we'll get to whenever the definitive Dylan collection releases it, which they have not done so far. We're now up to date with our album releases in the collection. Yeah.
And what will the next one be? It'll be Infidels.
Infidels.